Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined. They're real. When no one reports you missing, the silence becomes the loudest alarm. Marcia Brantley disappeared in the summer of 2009, but there was no break-in, no 911 call, no signs of struggle, just an empty home, a quiet husband, and a town that didn't notice. Until a hairdresser started asking questions. Cleveland, Tennessee, June 2009. On paper, it was a normal southern summer. Lawns humming with mowers, air thick with humidity, neighborhoods settling into routine. But at 4674 Cherokee Hills Road, something had already gone wrong, and no one knew it. Marcia Ellen Brantley, age 50, was last seen sometime in May or early June of that year. No definitive date, no verified final conversation, not even a record of her leaving home. The only thing louder than her absence was the collective silence that followed it. It wasn't until nearly 3 months later that someone, not family, not police, questioned it. Kelly DeLude, a local hairdresser, had been styling Marcia's hair for years. A steady client, Marcia came in every 4 to 6 weeks without fail. But by August 2009, DeLude realized something was off. There'd been no cancellations, no reschedules, just nothing. She called Marcia's phone. It rang once, then voicemail. Then it stopped ringing altogether. Later, when she reached Donnie Brantley, Marcia's husband, he casually responded that Marcia had left him. She wanted to get away for a while, he allegedly said. She needed a break. But there was no missing person report. No one had searched for her. She was simply gone. That was enough for DeLude. She filed the missing person report herself. That call kicked off a quiet but methodical investigation, one that would drag on for years and never recover a body. Marcia wasn't a recluse. She was a known figure in her circles, a former housing director at Lee University, an aspiring fiction writer, and a woman who deeply loved her pets. By all accounts, she had no history of spontaneous disappearance. She had hobbies, routines, and obligations. Her dogs were her children. Her blog, Writer Chick, had consistent posts until spring 2009, when suddenly the entries stopped. Investigators reviewed financial records. No credit card usage, no ATM withdrawals, no new phone lines, no ticket purchases, no digital footprints after early June. Inside the house, things looked undisturbed. Her Jeep was still parked outside. Her purse, laptop, medications, and cell phone were inside. Her dogs, unfed, later taken by animal control, had been left behind. There were no signs of a forced exit, no signs of violence, but also no signs of life. One of the first things detectives noticed. Donnie Brantley had never reported her missing. He had told various people different stories. She went to Florida. She needed space. She left him. She was camping, each version inconsistent with the one before. Cleveland Police Detective Gwen Hooks reviewed the timeline and found the inconsistencies jarring. He never asked us to look for her. That stuck with us from day one. Investigators pulled Marcia's phone records. The last tower ping was in town. No outgoing activity after June 2nd. Computer forensics showed a final login on her personal laptop in late May. Possibly her, possibly someone else. No outgoing emails. Drafts of a novel, unfinished. One strange note in her drafts read, "Sometimes I think if I disappeared, nobody would notice. That scares me more than dying." That line wasn't fiction anymore. Donnie, meanwhile, hadn't paused life. Neighbors reported he was seen mowing the lawn and visiting pawn shops. Weeks after her disappearance, he sold some of Marcia's personal belongings, including her jewelry and camping gear. When questioned, he claimed she told him to. There were no written authorizations. He canceled her phone line, closed her bank accounts, attempted to sell their home. Investigators filed search warrants. Inside the home, they noted a meticulous absence. No blood, no disturbed furniture, no signs of cleanup. But the master bedroom had been repainted, the carpet replaced. The explanation? Wear and tear, Donnie said. In a storage container on site, they recovered household items, including items belonging to Marcia that should have been in daily use. Among them, her hairdryer, vitamins, writing journals, and a half-packed suitcase with no boarding passes or tags. Cleveland police escalated the case to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI. Without a body or physical evidence of violence, TBI labeled the case suspicious, but not yet classifiable as homicide. Still, the circumstantial factors were stacking up, and no one, especially not investigators, could ignore the pattern. Cleveland police interviewed Donnie Brantley for the first time in August 2009. It was a routine welfare check, initiated not by family, but by a concerned hairdresser. Donnie didn't seem particularly alarmed. He didn't request assistance. In fact, according to the report, he casually stated that his wife, Marcia, had left him. He claimed she needed space. Then he said she'd gone camping. Then Florida. The only consistency in Donnie's statements was their inconsistency. Detectives began comparing his timelines. When asked to name the exact date Marcia left, he hesitated. He gave different weeks in different interviews. No phone records supported the idea that Marcia had made plans to travel. No camping gear had been packed. Her tent and sleeping bag were later found in a storage unit that Donnie had access to. He said she took her Jeep. The Jeep was parked in the driveway. He said she left her cell phone because it was broken. The device was functioning and had been used within the residence days before her disappearance. The statements didn't just raise suspicions, they exposed logistical impossibilities. Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI agents reviewed Donnie's financial activity during the time Marcia was reportedly away. He had begun pawning household items, jewelry, electronics, tools. Some of the items belonged to Marcia. One ring, described in a previous will, was among the pieces sold. There was no documentation that she had agreed to sell or transfer those possessions. Detectives requested access to the couple's residence again. This time, they executed a full search warrant. Inside the home, there were no visible signs of forced entry or physical violence, but investigators noted several areas of concern. The master bedroom had new carpet. When asked, Donnie said he had replaced it because it was worn. No receipts were produced for professional installation, and the timing of the replacement aligned with the period after Marcia was last seen. A chemical test was conducted for trace blood. None was found, but the forensics team collected items for further analysis, including several rugs, a mattress cover, and clothing stored in plastic bins. They also retrieved Marcia's computer, external hard drive, and backup disks. Digital forensics began the next phase of the case. Marcia's computer revealed regular logins until late May 2009. Then, complete silence. No logins, no emails, no document activity. Drafts of a manuscript were untouched. A personal journal entry from April hinted at tension in the home, but stopped short of naming threats. He doesn't yell, but sometimes the silence is heavier than shouting. I don't know what he wants anymore. No record existed of Marcia planning to leave. She had no known friends in Florida, no travel reservations. Her bank accounts remained untouched. Social security activity stopped entirely. Donnie's behavior during the search raised further questions. According to detectives, he was cooperative, but unusually unemotional. When asked why he hadn't filed a missing person report, he responded, "She left before. She always came back." That claim could not be substantiated. Family and friends said Marcia had never disappeared or taken extended trips without informing someone. One detective remarked privately, "There was a gap between what he said and what the data showed. That gap got wider every time we asked a question." In small towns, time moves slower, but truth catches up. Investigators began assembling a timeline. Each contradictory statement from Donnie was placed beside tangible facts, receipts, timestamps, call logs. The story didn't align. Donnie had visited a local home improvement store twice in late June. Purchases included heavy-duty trash bags, muriatic acid, and gloves. When questioned, he said it was for home cleaning. The materials were not consistent with routine upkeep. By the fall of 2009, Marcia Brantley had been missing for over 3 months. No one besides a hairdresser and a few colleagues had asked where she was. There were no community flyers, no social media posts, no reward fund, no family plea aired on TV. Without a body, the case remained officially listed as a missing person investigation. But internally, the tone was shifting. TBI analysts added Marcia's name to NamUs, the National Missing Persons Database. Her DNA was entered, dental records submitted, CODIS samples were stored, pending any future match, but none came. The interior of 46-74 Cherokee Hills Drive didn't look like a crime scene. That was the problem. On the surface, it appeared untouched. No overturned furniture, no broken glass, no visible bloodstains. But in cases like these, it's what's not there that matters. And in this case, the house was missing more than just its owner. TBI agents conducted a full forensic sweep in September 2009. With the aid of Cleveland police and certified crime scene technicians, the property was methodically examined. The objective was not to find dramatic visual evidence. It was to confirm whether a woman who reportedly left of her own accord had taken anything with her at all. She hadn't. The master bedroom had been recently recarpeted. Donnie Brantley claimed it was because the flooring was worn out, but the previous carpet, if discarded, had never been located. Investigators noted that none of the other rooms had undergone renovations. There was no work order or receipt confirming professional removal. Samples were taken from the new carpet, along with subfloor swabs, to test for any trace biological evidence. No positive results were returned. No blood, no DNA. But it didn't close the matter, it opened it further. In the closet, women's clothing remained, but forensic photo logs noted the wardrobe was noticeably incomplete. Several sets of shoes, personal grooming items, and daily use accessories were absent, but none had been packed. No luggage tags, no duffel bags, no folded outfits near the door. It was as if someone had begun emptying the closet, then stopped. Inside the bathroom drawer, Marcia's prescriptions were found. Unopened, months expired. Her toothbrush was dry. Investigators confirmed her hairbrush contained strands consistent with her DNA, as verified by stored samples from her family. But those strands hadn't been pulled recently. Her cell phone was recovered from the kitchen drawer. Call history showed no outgoing calls or texts after June 2, 2009. Incoming calls went unanswered. The phone had remained in sleep mode, connected to the home's power strip as if charging. It had not left the property during the entire summer. A USB flash drive retrieved from her home office contained unpublished drafts of fictional work. One document, modified in May 2009, carried the fill name Last Lines. It was unfinished, abruptly ending mid-sentence. Metadata analysis confirmed no subsequent activity. Marcia's laptop, found in the bedroom, showed similar patterns. Login logs ceased in late May. Internet browsing history included local weather, pet care advice, and a purchase inquiry for a new garden hose. There was no evidence of searches for travel, relocation, or legal separation. Donnie had told investigators she took off with friends. There were no such friends listed in her contacts. No witness, neighbor, colleague, or relative had seen her after May. The only phone number dialed in the days leading up to her disappearance was the local vet. The couple's 2 dogs, according to witness statements, had been left unattended for several days. Animal control was eventually called to the home. Donnie did not claim ownership or provide explanation for their abandonment. In a locked storage shed on the property, police found a collection of personal effects: Marcia's writing notebooks, her camping gear, and a suitcase that appeared half-packed. Its contents were inconsistent: 2 pairs of shoes but no clothing, a folded pillowcase, 1 bottle of insect spray, no travel documents, no receipts. Detectives concluded that the suitcase was preparation without execution. Either she'd started packing or someone else had started packing for her. They also discovered inside a sealed container a collection of trash bags containing women's hygiene products, expired food, and a bottle of expired clonazepam, a sedative not prescribed to Marcia under her medical records. Donnie denied knowledge of the prescription. No fingerprints of other individuals were found in the area searched. While the forensics didn't offer a definitive conclusion, they built a consistent narrative. Marcia had not left that house voluntarily, not in a way that made logical sense. No essentials were taken, no signs of transition, and critically, no signs that she'd prepared for any kind of extended absence. Detectives documented it all in a 67-page internal report, later submitted to the district attorney's office. The home was clean, but it was clean in the wrong places. One of the TBI agents later said, "Sometimes when you see a house that looks too perfect, what you're seeing isn't order, it's control. In late October 2009, the Cleveland Police Department submitted a formal request for forensic review of two sealed containers retrieved from a storage shed behind the Brantley residence. The shed, accessible only by padlock, contained a mix of household items including boxed decor, camping gear, and irregularly packed trash bags. Items that raised more concern than clarity. Investigators focused on a specific 33-gallon plastic bag. Inside, expired food products, hair-dyed tissues, feminine hygiene items, and a prescription bottle labeled under a name not matching Marcia Brantley. The drug was clonazepam, a controlled benzodiazepine not listed in her medical file. Donnie Brantley denied knowledge of its presence. No prescription history was found under his name either. The TBI submitted contents from the bag for chemical and DNA analysis. No blood was detected, but hair strands with mitochondrial profiles consistent with Marcia's maternal line were found inside the bag, embedded in bald tissues and clinging to the lining of a discarded hairbrush. The items weren't placed haphazardly. They were layered, intentionally compressed. The organization was abnormal for routine disposal. A crime scene analyst noted, the bag contained items from multiple personal routines, compressed together within a narrow time frame. It suggests a deliberate purge. The presence of peroxide-based dye stains was also noted, matching no open dye kits in the house. A second analysis concluded that the formula was similar to salon-grade developers, not over-the-counter. Forensic teams turned to the trash bins collected weekly from the Brantleys' curb during June and July. Archived waste from that time was no longer available, typical for residential garbage, but investigators canvassed local sanitation staff. One crew member recalled a bulk pickup call requested from the Brantley address in early July. The disposal included multiple black bags, marked household cleanout, tagged with red duct tape. Red tape was also found inside the storage unit. The contents of those bags were never recovered. TBI shifted its working hypothesis. They weren't looking for a missing person. They were tracking evidence of post-event concealment. As the forensic findings mounted, attention turned to possible chemical use. Purchase records showed Donnie had visited two local hardware stores in June 2009. Transactions included industrial-strength cleaner, a bottle of muriatic acid, latex gloves, and heavy-duty trash bags. When questioned, Donnie claimed he was preparing to refinish a tool cabinet in the garage. No such refinishing project was ever found underway. Investigators noted that no professional contractor had been hired to remove any items from the property. No haul-away receipts existed, yet furniture appeared rearranged. Wall patching was evident in the garage. A large oil-based stain was found on the concrete floor, visibly scrubbed, though not tested at the time. That oversight would haunt the case in later years. Digital review of Marcia's browsing history showed that her last recorded searches in May 2009 involved local hiking trails, pet boarding services, and a non-refundable vet appointment scheduled for the week after she disappeared. The appointment was never canceled. The animal never showed up. TBI consulted with an independent criminal analyst to develop a behavioral profile of the events. The theory proposed, the scene had been preemptively staged to imply that Marcia left voluntarily, yet nothing about the physical environment supported sustained absence. Instead, the data suggested an abrupt stop in activity, followed by strategic removal of clutter and evidence. In the absence of a body, prosecution requires continuity, and the continuity in this case wasn't in what could be seen, it was in what had gone missing. By mid-2013, 4 years had passed since anyone had seen Marcia Brantley alive. Her body had not been recovered. There was no crime scene, no confession, no witness. But what authorities did have, after years of quiet forensic assembly, was a case built on absence. The absence of financial activity, the absence of travel, the absence of credible explanation. That summer, the Bradley County Grand Jury reviewed the file. At its core, circumstantial evidence, consistently aligned, strategically documented, and growing harder to ignore. What began as a missing persons file had developed into a working theory of a concealed homicide. No-body cases are rare, and convictions even more so. But Tennessee law does not require a corpse to establish probable cause. Prosecutors believed they had enough. In October 2013, Donnie Brantley was indicted for first-degree murder. The charge came quietly. No press conference, No morning raids. Just a warrant and a knock. He was arrested without resistance. At arraignment, Brantley entered a not guilty plea. His attorney immediately filed motions, citing lack of physical evidence and absence of direct witness testimony. The defense strategy was clear. Question the legitimacy of a prosecution built on silence. The prosecution's position was straightforward. Marcia hadn't left. She hadn't run away. She hadn't contacted anyone, accessed her accounts, or attempted to start over. And in place of a body, they offered a chain of behavior: inconsistent statements, financial gain, rapid disposal of her belongings, chemical purchases, and a personal history that did not support spontaneous disappearance. But trial didn't follow. Legal delays stacked, discovery extensions, motion hearings, more delays. Eventually, the district attorney's office made a tactical decision. After a reevaluation of the likelihood of conviction without physical remains or definitive forensic proof, they withdrew the indictment. The case was dismissed without prejudice, meaning it could be refiled if new evidence emerged. Donnie walked free. He made no public statement. He declined interviews. The only remark captured on record was during booking. "I didn't do anything wrong." Investigators disagreed, but could not push further. What followed was not resolution, but stasis. The Brantley home was sold. Public interest faded. The media shifted focus. The case, though still open, entered what law enforcement calls a cold phase. For those who had worked the file, from TBI agents to local detectives, the outcome didn't represent failure. It represented limitation. Sometimes the truth is all there, just not in the right format for a courtroom. The Brantley case highlights one of the most difficult challenges in American criminal law: establishing murder without a body. Prosecutors can build cases on motive, opportunity, and forensic logic, but juries still expect something physical, something to anchor belief. In Marcia's case, what prosecutors had was a structure built on gaps, but the gaps were not random. They were organized, predictable, controlled, and that, for many who followed the case closely, was more disturbing than any confession could have been. By 2016, the Marcia Brantley case had been dormant for over 2 years. The 2013 indictment had failed to proceed to trial, and Donnie Brantley had walked out of custody without facing a jury. But inside the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the case remained under review. A no-body homicide doesn't end with dismissal. It pauses. The file was large, spanning hundreds of pages: interview transcripts, forensic records, computer logs, financial data, and multiple affidavits. Investigators had already mapped the contradictions in Donnie Brantley's statements and timelines. Now the task was to find new ground, not recycled suspicion, but fresh evidence that could shift the legal balance. In early 2016, TBI forensic analysts reopened Marcia Brantley's digital records. Advances in file recovery software allowed them to reconstruct partially deleted entries from her home computer. Among them was a fragment of a personal document. The content was limited: a short, emotional paragraph that referenced feeling unheard in her own home and tired of being invisible. One line stood out: "I can't keep pretending this house is safe." The document had no title. Its creation date matched late May 2009. It had not been backed up or shared. Forensic review confirmed the file had been manually deleted from the system, an action time-stamped days after Marcia's last confirmed activity. Who deleted it and why couldn't be proven, but the timing aligned too closely with her disappearance to be ignored. In tandem, investigators re-interviewed 2 former co-workers from Lee University who had previously offered general character references. This time, they provided specific recollections. One said Marcia had confided about a growing sense of unease at home, but hadn't elaborated. The other recalled that she had once whispered, "If something happens to me, it's not because I wanted to leave." None of it was admissible proof, but it expanded the behavioral profile, showing increasing anxiety in the weeks before she vanished. The district attorney's office, reviewing these additions, decided to take another swing. On July 11, 2016, a second indictment for first-degree murder was filed against Donnie Brantley. The charge mirrored the 2013 indictment, but leaned more heavily on cumulative behaviors: his shifting statements, his decision not to report her missing, his unexplained possession and sale of her belongings, and the forensic indicators of concealment in the home and storage shed. At the time of the second arrest, Donnie again declined to comment. His attorney filed immediate motions to dismiss. Unlike in 2013, the prosecution now had recovered digital material, an updated behavioral profile, refreshed witness affidavits, documentation of inconsistent financial transactions. But what they didn't have, still, was a body, or a crime scene, or any forensic indicator that pointed definitively to violence. Suppression hearings began in early 2017. The defense argued that the newly recovered document lacked chain of custody continuity. The partial file, they claimed, could not be authenticated to Marsh alone, nor did it establish intent, threat, or criminal activity. They also challenged the psychological relevance of anecdotal coworker comments, framing them as hearsay injected into a case with no physical center. A judge allowed the evidence to remain in the record, but acknowledged it would carry limited weight. Prosecutors then presented evidence of Donnie's chemical purchases in June 2009. Items like muriatic acid, heavy-duty contractor bags, and solvent-based cleaners. Defense counsel argued these purchases were for home renovation purposes, a claim unsupported by receipts or contractor records, but also not disproven by direct evidence. No blood was ever recovered. No physical link between the alleged cleaning products and any biological matter had been preserved. The garage had been cleaned, the carpet replaced, the tools possibly used, gone. The defense then turned to the concept of location uncertainty. In no-body prosecutions, the state must prove that a murder occurred within their jurisdiction. In this case, without Marsh's remains or a recorded confession, there was no scene. That legal weakness undermined the case from the inside out. The prosecution's last angle was timeline control. Marsh's sudden digital silence, her vanished routine, the forensic clustering of personal items discarded too quickly to indicate a slow departure. But juries don't convict on disappearance alone, and courts don't uphold charges based on what's not there. In February 2018, the district attorney's office dropped the case a second time. Citing insufficient new evidence to ensure a viable trial, they issued a statement that acknowledged public frustration, but emphasized the need for legal precision over emotional instinct. Donnie Brantley was released once more. No additional charges have been filed since. The 2016-2018 legal cycle of the Brantley case offers a blueprint of the limits of circumstantial law enforcement. Prosecutors were not careless. Investigators did not forget. But absence, no matter how consistent, is not evidence of murder in court. What the case did change was process. Since 2019, TBI and the Tennessee District Attorneys General Conference have used the Brantley case as a model in no-body homicide training workshops. Early-stage response procedures were updated statewide to prioritize immediate home search of suspected disappearances, digital data extraction within the first 72 hours, forensic waste collection protocols. The idea is simple. Preserve what seems mundane because it's often all that's left. Marsha Brantley's name no longer appears in most headlines. The second failed indictment in 2018 meant no future court date, no testimony, no cross-examination. In the eyes of the public record, the case stalled permanently. But among those who knew her and those who once worked her case, the story never truly stopped. One of the few constants throughout the investigation was Kelly DeLude, the Cleveland hairdresser who first noticed Marsha's absence back in 2009. It was her intuition, not family concern or law enforcement, that initiated the first report. Over the years, she's repeated one thing to anyone who asked, "If I hadn't made that call, I don't know if anyone ever would have." Kelly didn't have access to forensics or court transcripts, but she had memory. And sometimes in cases like these, that's what lasts the longest. Detectives like Gwen Hooks and TBI analysts moved on to other assignments after 2018, but they continued to refer back to the Brantley file for procedural insight. One former investigator admitted during a law enforcement roundtable that the case shaped how she approached every missing person report thereafter. You learn to assume it matters, even when no one else is asking questions yet. The state didn't issue a death certificate for Marsha. There was no formal declaration of presumed death. Without a body, no death could be confirmed. And yet, in all the ways that matter, her bank activity, medical records, online presence, and human contact, Marcia Brantley ceased to exist after June 2009. That disappearance left no physical remains, but it left impact. Her absence quietly shifted how small-town law enforcement approached unreported missing adults. Previously, Tennessee, like many states, required family initiation for missing persons reports in the case of adults. But by 2020, several counties had adopted amendments that allowed concerned third parties to escalate the issue. It was a small policy shift, but one prompted by a simple question: what if the only person who notices something's wrong is a hairdresser? At Lee University, where Marcia worked as housing director, her former office remained empty for several months after her disappearance. Eventually, someone else filled the role, but her name lingered in archive staff directories. The university didn't make a public statement. There was no tribute, no plaque, just silence. For some, that silence felt appropriate. Marcia had been a private woman, but for others it became a symbol of how easily people can vanish, not just from their homes, but from the record. In 2022, a grassroots group of volunteers launched a small digital memorial project in Tennessee. The site included profiles of unresolved disappearances across the state. Marcia's was one of the first to be uploaded. The page featured a timeline, available public documents, and a single sentence pinned at the top. She didn't just vanish, she was overlooked. That digital archive has since become a quiet hub for unsolved missing person stories in the region, visited by journalists, students, and amateur sleuths. Each year, on the week marking Marcia's disappearance, the profile is reposted across several advocacy pages, not to accuse, not to dramatize, but to remind. The Brantley case continues to be referenced in criminal justice training, particularly around early response timing and suspected domestic disappearances. Instructors use it to emphasize how the absence of a report doesn't mean the absence of a crime. Legally, the file remains open. The TBI has not closed it. The case sits in a category known internally as active cold, eligible for immediate reactivation should new evidence emerge. DNA profiles have been preserved. NamUs data remains updated. Facial age progression imaging is unnecessary. Marcia would be 66 today. Any update now would not be a reappearance. It would be a recovery. No such recovery has occurred. The last credible sighting was in 2009. No transactions, travel documents, traffic citations, tax filings, or housing records have surfaced under her identity since. The assumption within law enforcement remains unchanged. Marcia is deceased. The question of how and by whose hand remains unanswered. But outside of legal definitions, the people who remember her maintain their own version of justice. Not through charges, but through documentation. They keep her name alive, not with headlines, but with structure, with process, with care. Sometimes justice doesn't look like a trial. Sometimes it looks like never letting a case be buried. There was no recovered body, no confirmed crime scene, no physical evidence of a struggle. Yet in the town of Cleveland, Tennessee, a woman disappeared without a trace, and no one, not family, not neighbors, not even law enforcement, could explain how or when it happened. 16 years later, as of June 2025, Marcia Brantley is still listed as a missing person. No remains, no murder weapon, no official resolution. The legal system demands proof, beyond reasonable doubt, not just suspicion, and that's where this case collapsed. After Donnie Brantley's charges were dropped in 2013 due to insufficient evidence, the prosecution never refiled. Investigators had compiled a circumstantial case, an abruptly cleaned residence, a hasty quitclaim, deed transfer, disturbing journal entries, inconsistent statements, and a husband with no reasonable explanation for his wife's disappearance. But there was no direct evidence of death. No blood, no body, no confession. The case, legally, had nowhere to go. Despite the lack of legal closure, authorities quietly maintained their position. They believed Marcia Brantley was dead, and they believed her husband knew what happened. But belief alone, even supported by motive and behavior, doesn't meet the burden of proof required to prosecute, and without a body, it rarely ever does. In the years that followed, Donnie Brantley faded from public scrutiny. He never remarried. He remained in Tennessee. There have been no arrests, no civil suits, no dramatic revelations. No one ever came forward. The garage where he reportedly cleaned suspicious items was never forensically linked to a crime. The yard was never dug up with a warrant. No cadaver dogs were called until years later, long after any scent would have dissipated. Whatever happened to Marcia, if something happened at all, remains locked in a gap of time between spring and summer of 2009. That gap has never been fully bridged. But beyond the criminal case is a harder question. How did it take months for anyone to report Marcia missing? How did a woman vanish and no one sounded the alarm? The answer lies in the structure of her life. No children, parents deceased, friends scattered, a marriage that had become isolating. Marcia was slowly removed from every tether to the outside world. Her social media accounts went silent. Her beloved pets, according to reports, were gone. And still no one acted. Tennessee law at the time required that only a family member could file a missing person report. No relatives stepped forward. It wasn't until a co-worker of Donnie's became suspicious, months later, that the alarm was raised. By then, any forensic trace was likely gone. It was a fatal delay, not just in time, but in visibility. Marcia's life was quiet. Her disappearance was quieter. It was only after local journalists and true crime programs like 48 Hours picked up the case that public awareness grew. But media coverage can only amplify. It can't replace evidence. And in the legal world, headlines are not admissible in court. Today, Marcia Brantley's name is etched not in granite, but in digital registries, cold case files, NamUs databases, and archive footage. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation has not closed her case, but they have publicly acknowledged that no active leads remain. The file sits. The silence continues. Yet Marcia's story serves as more than a mystery. It is a sobering case study on what happens when someone disappears and no one notices. It's a warning about the fragility of social connection, about how easy it is for certain victims, middle-aged, childless, without close family, to fall through the cracks of both society and the justice system. In 2017, Tennessee changed its laws. Now, friends and non-family members can initiate a missing person report. The change was influenced in part by the failings exposed in cases like Marcia's. It came too late for her, but not for others. A retired detective involved in the case later stated, "We had everything but the one thing the courts needed, a body. Without that, it's just a hole. And you can't build a conviction on a hole." It's true, justice isn't always served with finality. Sometimes it fades. It dissolves in paperwork, in cautious prosecutors, in the slow erosion of public attention. And sometimes it vanishes altogether, just like the person at the center of it. To this day, Donnie Brantley maintains his innocence. He has never been convicted of any crime related to Marcia's disappearance. But for those who still remember her, not through headlines, but through memory, there's a different kind of truth that lingers. The absence of Marcia Brantley is not just a cold case, it's a cold warning. Justice in this case did not come with a verdict. It came with a void. Some stories don't end with a conviction, but with a void. As someone who's walked through every detail of this case, I'm left with one truth. Silence can be deadly. When someone slowly disappears from their own life, from relationships, from community, it should matter. It must matter. Because justice delayed, ignored, or dismissed is still a reflection of who we are as a society. So I ask you, what would you do if someone close to you went quiet? Would you check in, or would you wait until it was too late? If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? What did this case make you think about? And if it didn't sit right with you, tell me why. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your voice, your attention, it helps keep these stories alive.